Yes. Why do you think so many young Zimbabweans are coming here to South Africa, even though they are struggling to survive here?
I think it's a very simple reason. It's because of the socio-economic conditions of our country. You know, as you know, Zimbabwe is not at a position to be feeding anyone because of the unemployment rate, which is so high, the mismanagement of the country, you know, where people are suppressed even to the extent that their freedom is minimized, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and otherwise. So we have seen many young Zimbabweans crossing to come to South Africa and other countries.
Okay, this is the first time that the Zimbabwean embassies here in South Africa have had to take such a step. Do you think there was pressure from the South African government to move these people back home?
Definitely, there's been pressure exerted on the system so that people can be repatriated back to Zimbabwe. And there's a number of issues why the South African government is taking that stance. One of the reasons is the competition for jobs in South Africa is also stiff. And in recent years, we have seen other countries, you know, economy going down as well. So it's not only Zimbabweans that are in South Africa. We have people from Burundi. We've got lots of people from Malawi, Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, and some as far as Nigeria and Angola or even Sudan. So it is in the interest of the government of South Africa to be making sure that whatever resources that are available should be first allocated to South Africans. But I think in recent years, it's been kind of difficult because even the unemployment rate of South Africa is also a bit going up. It's slightly over 30%. So because of that reason, they are now trying to avoid a catastrophe like the one that we've experienced in Zimbabwe, where everything goes out of control. So they've now embarked on a program, first and foremost, to make sure that the people that are here, especially Zimbabweans, they are well documented. Otherwise, they are illegal immigrants.
Okay. The South African government has also built a new fence at the Beitbridge border, and they're building a new wall on the border with Mozambique. What do you think is happening here? Is this a deliberate step to avoid illegal immigrants, or is this just for security?
I think if you analyze the timing of the erection of these two particular structures, fences as they are, it's a time at which the world has just been struck by this pandemic coronavirus, the COVID-19. So it is in view of that pandemic that South Africa cannot afford to have people crossing into this country without knowing those people whether they are infected or not infected with this COVID-19. So it is a good move, actually, if you are going to take it from the perspective of the economy and the health of this nation, South Africa. So they've erected those two structures to make sure they minimize, if not eradicate, the influx of undocumented migrants to this country, in case they can bring more harm than good to this country because of the COVID-19 disease.
Okay, 3,000 is very small. It's a small number. Estimates are that there's close to 4 million Zimbabweans living in South Africa. Why do you think the other people, the more than 4 million people, don't want to leave this country to go back home?
You see, there is a number of reasons why Zimbabweans would not want to leave South Africa. First and foremost, people in general, never mind Zimbabweans or elsewhere or any other national, people value life. You know, people value life. So if you compare, if you're going to take an analogy of the political standings and the economic situation in Zimbabwe and South Africa, you see the difference, and you see and realize that actually it's not even making sense for anyone whose mind is still in a sane state to be saying, I want to live in Zimbabwe. It's an atmosphere, otherwise we would even push for our elders, you know, people that are not able to do anything for themselves anymore. Those are people who can maybe try to kind of retire from daily activities, because in Zimbabwe, all the facets or the entities that makes a young person active and enjoy life is kind of closed. It's minimized to the extent that it's almost in extinction. So people now, they find it much easier to live in South Africa because of the employment rate, which is still okay, and you know, basic access to basic goods, and the freedom of movement, to a greater extent even freedom of speech. So as human beings, we are designed to be, you know, clamoring for those basic rights and those things that makes our lives much easier and better. So people would rather stay here, because you must understand here, there's no government which can shoot people with guns here, whether illegal or illegal. The shops are full of food. Even with this coronavirus disease, people are having to be fed. Some communities are receiving food parcels from the government. A lot of cash is being allocated. So it's a very stable economy, and everything is flowing. Let me also add in that line, this is precisely why you see even some people that are even doing well in Zimbabwe, they cannot stay in Zimbabwe. We have a number of church leaders that are staying here almost on permanent basis. Some of them, they actually fly to go to services in Zimbabwe. So South Africa remains a very beautiful country in terms of the economic standings. So life is much enhanced here than in Zimbabwe.
Okay, it's not a secret that many Zimbabweans who are here do not have documents. They don't even have a passport. Do you foresee a situation where the South African government is going to start finding and deporting people?
I think what I would like first to address, the most important key issue there, is why do we have so many people, so many Zimbabweans in South Africa without documents? That is the first point that we must try and analyze and probably come to sense with what is happening. The reason number one, we need to understand how difficult it is for anyone to acquire a passport in Zimbabwe. We have seen very long queues there by the passport office in Zimbabwe. And you must understand there is no devolution in Zimbabwe. If you live in Chipinge, you want to take a passport, you're gonna have to go to Harare. If it cannot be done in one day, then you have to ask your question, where do you sleep if you don't have relatives in Harare? The same is said about people in Murewa, the same is said about people in Binga, and so on and so forth. So there's no, I mean, people definitely would want to put up with such a situation whereby they live in a country that doesn't provide them with the basic necessities. So as a result, people are running away from a very bad government. People are running away from hunger. People are running away from starvation. I'll put it across to you that because of the mismanagement of Zimbabwe, 500,000, almost 500,000 people in Zimbabwe, they are facing starvation before the end of 2021. So if you put that into consideration, you realize people would rather risk and cross an electrified fences, even crossing flooded rivers, including Limpopo River, which we know it's got full, I mean, it is full of crocodiles. I think there was actually an incident in 2007 where over 20 people were swept by the flooding river, and they were, you know, they made to be food for crocodiles there by Limpopo. Why would people take such a risk? It's because of the situation in Zimbabwe. If you are in Zimbabwe, your life is cheap. Life is cheap in Zimbabwe. in the sense that there is no value that is placed on people's lives by the powers that be. So people will risk anything to cross over.
Okay, so would the South African government then be forced, given the situation, to deport people?
Yes, the South African government has no alternative. There is no option they can have to minimize the influx of undocumented people. The other issue is also that we must understand that the economy of South Africa is ramping very well. They have the resources even to deport people. In Zimbabwe, I will tell you, there's a lot of people that are not documented in Zimbabwe. From Malawi especially, we've seen that over a couple of decades during the reign of Kamusi Hastings Banda, and the troubles that we fell even in Mozambique. So we have lots of Mozambican people as well as Malawian people. But because of the incapacity of the government to be managing anything in terms of standards, we have lots of people that are not documented. But the government of Zimbabwe lacks the funds and the ability and probably the political will to be even deporting people to stabilize even our own economy. That is the reason why you haven't heard Zimbabwe busing people to deport them back to their countries of origin. So South Africa has that capacity. And there's nothing wrong for the South African government to deport people. But also we must understand there are other people that are not documented, but who are now documented, and they are classified as refugees. South Africa has lots of refugees, but it has to be controlled. So whichever way it goes, South Africa has to do what it has to do to make sure the economy of this country stays, in a very reasonable manner. Otherwise, it will be another Zimbabwe in the making if things are if things are not corrected the way that it should.
Okay, so when people are living here, they are going to be put into quarantine for 21 days. What will happen to people who are coming from Zimbabwe when the lockdown finally ends? Are they going to need to have to go into 21 days lockdown also, or quarantine?
I think we must understand that the 21-day lockdown period has been designed to make sure the COVID-19 disease is minimized, it is controlled. But there is no way, given the current global health position of this world, that any country can afford to think that locking down a country would actually eradicate the COVID-19, because we must understand that there is no cure yet. So as such, the lockdown, even if it ends, there are other stringent rules that has to be put in place so that the spread of the COVID-19 is minimized. And one of those things is to quarantine people. If people are not quarantined, then you must understand that it is very catastrophic for the health sector of South Africa. It puts the South Africans and all those who live in this country in danger. So yes, they will be quarantined even after the lockdown.
And how is that going to affect travel between Zimbabwe and South Africa? A lot of Zimbabweans come to South Africa on a daily basis.
Mr. Gambako, it breaks my heart to even really analyze and think and talk about the cross-border situation between these two countries. The people that are crossing these two borders, I would put it across to you that more than 95% of the people crossing are crossing from Zimbabwe to South Africa than the other way around.
Yes.
Because of a number of factors that I've alluded to earlier on. So now we must understand that the people are not crossing in a free and acceptable way. When we're talking of crossing to South Africa, very few will make it through the borders because the border is manned by security forces. But people are crossing in their thousands, almost on a daily basis, using other means. What I think must actually happen, if you can allow me to explain, as a leader of a political party, as I'm the president of DRP, what needs to happen is for the South African government first to take a stance and condemn the way elections are being held and how Zimbabwe is being governed as a country. Because South African government must understand that they have to take a vested interest in our politics, because South Africa is not attractive globally when Zimbabwe is a gray area. I'll put it to you, Mr. Gambakwe, that for instance, there is a guy in other parts of the world, maybe from Indonesia, there in Jakarta, who would want to invest in South Africa. When you invest in a country, after investment, what you need to understand is which other way would you grow your business? Growth is very pertinent. So if you establish an investment in a country, you need to focus on growth. Now, to grow from from South Africa, you check what is happening to the neighboring countries. Then you have a country like Zimbabwe producing nothing, and all these illegal people crossing over to South Africa, which in turn causes social clashes like what we have seen during the xenophobic attacks. So no one would want to come and invest in South Africa when they see people throwing stones, xenophobia taking place in South Africa. Why? Because there is too much illegal immigrants in the country fighting for jobs. So it is in the interest of South Africa to make sure that Zimbabwe is in the right state politically. Otherwise, South Africa remains unattractive under globalization.
Okay.
So I'm saying, the government of South Africa must make sure they condemn the ill practices that ZANU-PF has continued to do over the past decades, over the past 4 decades. That does not put Zimbabwe on a very good spot economically. So we cannot curb this scourge of people crossing to and from in a manner that is not accepted by the law until the government of South Africa moves to do what is right.
Okay, so these people who are being taken to Zimbabwe, are they not going to just cross back?
They will definitely cross back. And it won't be the first time. This has been an ongoing situation between these two countries. It's routinely, people are taken back and then they come back, whether straight or the other way, but people will always come back for greener pastures. It's a problem that will continue to haunt people, problems that will continue to affect these two countries until Zimbabwe one day realizes political freedom and prosperity. We're going to brace ourselves for this situation for a very long time. So people will, yes, indeed, come back.
Okay, so as Democracy Restoration Party, how would you solve this problem that we have between Zimbabwe and South Africa and people traveling illegally into South Africa and then having to be sent back home after they fail to make it here?
It's not an easy decision, Mr. Gambakwe, for any adult to cross from one country to the other in the manner that Zimbabweans have been seen crossing from Zimbabwe to South Africa. There are situations and times where the husband would leave the wife and the kids back in Zimbabwe and try to bring them later on, or vice versa. The mother will first come here. That has caused a lot of problems between marriages. So that's why we have even a high rate of marriage breakdowns in Zimbabwe. It's because of the crossings of people from Zimbabwe to South Africa in a manner which is not expected. It's not an easy decision at all. So it just shows you how deep our problems are. Because you must understand, if a person is crossing a flooded river, a river with crocodiles, it's a do or die situation. Why would someone risk his life to that extent if all is well in Zimbabwe. And by the way, as it is portrayed, as it is shown, as it is explained by the ruling party and the government of Zimbabwe, that all is fine. You see, then why would people risk their lives to that extent? There are people who are sometimes being robbed, and after being robbed, they go back again to try and cross to go to South Africa and other countries. It just shows you, it's evidence of how bad is our situation in Zimbabwe.
Okay, so what would you do as a party? Let's say now we put you in charge. How would you solve this problem?
This problem will just vanish in a matter of a few months if the economy of Zimbabwe is put on track, because people wouldn't find it necessary anymore to risk their lives to go and get a better life elsewhere when they can access that better life in Zimbabwe. We are talking of a people that has been denied a chance to really be themselves in their own country. You understand? This is why we have been constantly saying we need to understand that if DRP, Democracy Restoration Party, comes to play, if we become the ruling party, we need to revamp the whole political structure. We need to change the discourse of politics in Zimbabwe, because currently the system that we have is a system that favors a few. This is the very system why, you know, in the past years, prior to our independence, we had people who crossed over to other countries. But when that didn't help, what did people do? They defied the constitution of the Rhodesian government. They had to forego the constitution of the Rhodesian government, which did not allow people to pick up arms. So they picked up arms and they went into the bush and they fought for their freedom. So we are in that position again. We have rolled back where people don't have rights to anything. So they are now embarking on a do or die situation. The people who liberated or who took part in the liberation struggle, they had no choice. It was a do or die situation, because the situation had come to a situation, I mean, the country had come to a situation where everyone was very uncomfortable by the life that was being exerted by the government of Ian Douglas Smith. Now, we are right at the same position that people are not comfortable at all by the life that is being given to the people of Zimbabwe by Emmerson Mnangagwa's government that he inherited from Robert Mugabe.
Okay, so would you introduce a program to ask citizens to come back home if you're in office?
If we are in office, the first and foremost right that would give the Zimbabweans is to recognize where they are and to offer them a reasonable solution to the problems they are facing there in the countries where they've immigrated to. First and foremost, many of them are not documented, like you've said. It's not only an issue of repatriating people back to Zimbabwe, but it is an issue to understand that when a person goes out of his own country and spend years or even decades there, it's not easy just to say, come back here. Some will have bought property, some will have had more children there that are now calling themselves citizens of those particular countries. So what we seek to do first and foremost is to have a very good relationship with those countries that are concerned where Zimbabweans are, so that they can be taken care of even where they are. Then we would offer them a situation, if they would want to come back, they must come back and have some, there should be a subsidy allowed to them so that they carry on with their lives. And they also should be awarded even the right to vote wherever they are, because nevertheless, they remain Zimbabweans. So we have to change the games of the rules of the game here. We need to make sure our people are taken care of in Zimbabwe and outside our borders. So the point that I've just made there is the diaspora vote will also count, and there will be a setup to lure people to come back Zimbabwe in terms of remuneration packages that will be offered to people. Because you must understand, we need also to factor in the fact that people have acquired, most of them have acquired more knowledge as to how they can, how they can work. Some have advanced in education and so on and so forth. So whatever we're going to build as a new Zimbabwe, we must build something that attracts qualified personnel. Even those that are not qualified, they must, also be allowed to come and get into mainstream economic activities.
Okay. Many people in Zimbabwe are currently relying on remittances from the same people that are leaving now to go back home. What do you think would be the impact of people going back home and having no income from here in South Africa for those who are already living in Zimbabwe?
It's very important, Mr. Gambakwe, to understand that when people are being repatriated, there's going to be a very negative impact to the economy, not only of Zimbabwe or South Africa, but both countries, because we also have to understand there's quite a number of Zimbabweans that are working here, of which if they are to come back suddenly, it would do more harm than good even to the economy of South Africa. So there should be a way to put a synergy between these two countries so that whatever repatriation activities that will take place, it will be a win-win for both countries. Packages have got to be put forward. We need to have a very strong bilateral relationship between Zimbabwe and South Africa. So we must understand that whatever is going to happen when people are being repatriated, the impact should be minimized, and negative impact should be minimized on both sides, in South Africa and in Zimbabwe. But it can be done for a willing government, yeah.
Okay. Then we have the situation in Matabeleland, where almost everyone who is able-bodied has crossed over to South Africa. Why do you think the situation in Matabeleland is like that, where most people find it easier to just cross over and come to South Africa?
There are a number of factors that causes our situation to be in that standing. But we must understand that there's a lot of segregation from the way how Zimbabwean politics have been carried out over the centuries of time. The Ndebele people have always been viewed by the government of Zimbabwe. If you check the record of how the politics has been playing in Zimbabwe, you realize that it looked as if there is a serious segregation. People are being employed to work for the state on the basis of their ethnic extraction rather than on the basis of merit. So we have the whole entire good population that constitutes the population of Zimbabwe being left out of the mainstream politics because of their ethnic extraction. There is a sense in which the politics is being articulated to suggest that if you are a developed person, you are not 100% equal to, you shouldn't have equal opportunities as your fellow counterparts who are the Shona people. So there's been segregation and deprivation on the basis of ethnic extraction, which I think should be completely be eradicated if we are going to make sure Zimbabwe becomes a normal country again.
Okay, most people that are here in South Africa support opposition parties like the MDC. Do you think these parties have done enough under the current circumstances to provide or to find assistance for their members who are here? Unfortunately,
it's very difficult for me. I don't want to talk much about other opposition parties. They should be known for what they've done over their time of establishment up to now. The situation is judged for itself. The situation speaks for itself. What they've achieved and what a turmoil they've caused and how many people have died in the quest of change that they've promised, and to what extent have they gone to achieve the objectives of the establishment of that political party or parties. But I'll put it across to you. I would also want to say, you must understand the demographic of Zimbabwe in terms of infrastructure. You know, when you are coming from Bulawayo to Harare. What strikes you is the majestic standing of this beautiful golden building that we all know, the Sheraton Hotel. That will tell you straight away that I'm now entering a metropolitan area. And by the time of the building of that particular city, or I mean that particular structure, infrastructure, you need to understand what was happening in Bulawayo. Then we also talk of, you have this beautiful attraction that also you see just before you even see the Sheraton Hotel. There is a beautiful stadium called National Sports Stadium. What was happening in Bulawayo by the time of building the National Sports Stadium? Now you have another smaller stadium right, not very far from Sheraton Hotel, a couple of kilometers there in the Mbari area, the so-called Rufaro Stadium, which was built, I think, in the late 60s or late 50s or early 60s, thereabout. That Rufaro Stadium, what was happening then in Bulawayo is that they built the Baba Field Stadium. So from that time up to now, especially from the time of independence up to now, there has been nothing happening in Bulawayo. That is the segregation and the marginalization of the people of Bulawayo. There's nothing to talk about Bulawayo. Even if you talk of hotels, you see, we don't only have Sheraton Hotel, there is Holiday Inn. Now you go to Bulawayo, you check what they call Holiday Inn there. You've got Cresta Lodge, you see the other branch, if any, what is there to talk about Cresta Lodge in Bulawayo. You see places, I mean, many infrastructure. So Bulawayo definitely cannot be said that it's the second biggest city or the second most important city in Zimbabwe, or one of the most important cities in Zimbabwe. I mean, it does not suggest like that. You would wonder what kind of budget they've been putting to make sure the people of Bulawayo are well taken care of. So these are the dynamics that have to be dealt with when DRP comes to office.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot in this topic. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would like to say this issue of the Shona and Ndebele fighting, it's a system that previous political parties have failed to address. That's why you have seen the serious fighting between Welshman Ngube and Morgan Tsvangirai just after the formation of MDC, and then the fight between Thokozani Kupe and Nelson Chamisa. All those things are nothing but rubbish. It's political stupidity, and it does not take the country forward. You understand? People must understand that before we are Shona or Ndebele, we are all Zimbabweans, and as such, we need to unite. The only political party that I think, that I know, that I believe would be able to unite people across ethnic extraction divide will be DRP. So the big or the most important point that I want to make is, guys, let's unite as Zimbabweans. There is a chance that we have, and we should not spoil that chance. In unity, there are so many glorious achievements that we can achieve, and our lives will be enhanced in our motherland if we unite. So we want to erase the idea that people from Matabeleland should always second someone who is Shona. That is completely unacceptable in the structure of our political struggle to the emancipation of everybody in the mainstream politics.
Okay, I want to end with a question that is directed directly at you. What would it take for you to move your business to Harare?
You see, what I would like to say is it will be very easy. Just depends on the dynamics involved. Why should I move it there? Otherwise, you know, it won't be necessary if things are very well in Zimbabwe. We can always try and do something there completely different from here. But investors wouldn't want to go to Zimbabwe given the current political and economic situation. We need to be turning our economy so that it can help the people of Zimbabwe. What we have to look into is your small to medium enterprises that needs to have a financial backup from the government. We need to establish even other entities like banks or other monetary institutions that are solely designed to be equipping the medium and small enterprises, so that the kids that are coming, our children coming from universities, they'll be able to get into those medium to small enterprises, manufacture and produce products, so that Zimbabwe won't be outsourcing the solutions to our problems, but we can actually solve our problems ourselves. The question is, why are we failing even to make matchsticks in Zimbabwe? You see, so there would not be any need to import other businesses to Zimbabwe. We can actually start from there and just grow from what we can do for ourselves.
Right, Mr. Brian Mubvumbi from Democracy Restoration Party. Thank you very much for joining me again today. I think I'll have to ask you to come back again before the end of the week so that we discuss this issue, because it's still in progress. The people are still in South Africa. They are yet to cross into Zimbabwe. So maybe let's talk when they've crossed over and we've seen how the process goes.
All right, wonderful. I also like to tell you that right now I'm in South Africa, but I can be any other countries. You see, there's UK, I've got Botswana, Namibia, and so on. We, as a political party, we are globe-trotting and addressing all the Zimbabweans. So for those who are here in South Africa who want a visitation, they can just follow the number that you have given them. They will be there in Joburg, will be in Northern Cape, Durban, and so on, to try and address even the challenges that people are facing here.
Thank you very much, sir. And we'll talk again very, very soon.
Wonderful. God bless. Thank you.